Marcus Henderson stood by his office window, watching his 5-year-old daughter Emma play in the backyard. She was laughing and running around with Sarah, their nanny. The sound of Emma's happy giggles made Marcus smile, but it also made his heart feel heavy. It had been 2 years since his wife Catherine died in that terrible car accident, and hearing Emma laugh like this was still painful and wonderful at the same time. Finding the right person to take care of Emma had been the hardest thing Marcus ever had to do. After Catherine died, he tried to do everything himself. He took time off work, hired housekeepers, and even asked his mother to help. But nothing worked. Emma was sad and angry. She missed her mother terribly and didn't want anyone else around. Marcus had to go back to work eventually. His business needed him, and the bills had to be paid. So he started looking for a nanny. The first woman he hired seemed nice enough, but Emma hated her. She would cry and scream whenever the nanny tried to help her with anything. The woman quit after 2 weeks. The second nanny was younger and more energetic. Marcus thought Emma might like her better. But this nanny spent most of her time on her phone, texting friends and posting pictures on social media. She barely paid attention to Emma at all. Marcus fired her after he came home early one day and found Emma playing alone in the yard while the nanny was inside watching television. After that, Marcus went through nanny after nanny. Some were too strict with Emma, others were too lazy. One woman ate all the food in the house and asked Marcus to buy her expensive things. Another nanny brought her boyfriend over while Marcus was at work. Some quit because Emma was too difficult. Others quit because they found better jobs. In 18 months, Marcus hired and fired 12 different nannies. He was getting desperate. Emma was becoming more difficult with each new person. She didn't trust anyone anymore. Marcus didn't blame her. He was starting to lose hope that he would ever find someone who could truly care for his daughter. Then Sarah Williams came for an interview. Marcus remembered that day perfectly. It was a rainy Tuesday morning in March. Sarah was exactly on time, not early and not late. She was 28 years old, with brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and kind blue eyes. She wore a plain white shirt and dark pants. Nothing fancy, but she looked clean and professional. What struck Marcus most was how quiet Sarah was. She didn't talk too much like some of the other nannies had. She answered his questions clearly and honestly. When he asked about her experience, she told him she had worked with children before but admitted she was still learning. Most of the other nannies had claimed to be experts with years of experience. Even when it was obviously not true. Sarah asked good questions about Emma. She wanted to know what Emma liked to eat, what games she enjoyed, and what made her feel safe. She didn't promise to fix all of Emma's problems or make her happy right away. She just said she would do her best to take good care of her. When Marcus introduced Sarah to Emma, something amazing happened. Emma, who usually hid behind Marcus, when meeting new people, actually looked at Sarah and said hello. Sarah got down on Emma's level and spoke to her in a soft, gentle voice. She didn't try to hug Emma or force her to play. She just sat nearby and waited for Emma to come to her. After 30 minutes, Emma was showing Sarah her favorite toys. After an hour, she was laughing at Sarah's silly faces. By the end of the day, Emma asked if Sarah could come back tomorrow. Marcus hired Sarah on the spot. That was 8 months ago, and Sarah had been perfect ever since. She arrived every morning at exactly 7 o'clock. She never called in sick. She never complained about anything. She helped Emma get dressed, made her breakfast, and walked her to school. She picked Emma up in the afternoon, helped with homework, and played games until Marcus came home from work. But Sarah did so much more than just the basic job requirements. She learned to make Emma's favorite pancakes exactly the way Catherine used to make them, with extra syrup and cut into funny shapes. She remembered that Emma didn't like the crusts on her sandwiches and always preferred apple juice over orange juice. She knew that Emma needed her special blanket when she was scared, and that reading 2 stories before bed was better than one. Sarah never asked for raises or time off. She never brought personal problems to work. She never talked about boyfriends or parties or shopping. She just focused completely on taking care of Emma, and Emma loved her for it. Marcus was grateful, but he was also puzzled. Sarah was different from any nanny he had ever met. Most women her age were thinking about their social lives, their careers, their futures. They talked about weekend plans and vacation dreams. Sarah never mentioned anything about her life outside of work. Every evening at 6 o'clock, Sarah would pack up her things, say goodbye to Emma, and leave. Marcus had no idea where she went or what she did until 7 the next morning. She didn't drive a car, so she must walk or take the bus. But where? And why was she always so secretive about her personal life? Marcus found himself watching Sarah more carefully. She wore the same few outfits over and over, but they were always clean and neat. Her shoes were old but well maintained. She brought lunch from home every day in a simple brown bag and never spent money on coffee or snacks, like his office workers did when Marcus offered to share expensive takeout dinners with Sarah and Emma. Sarah always politely declined, saying she wasn't hungry. When he suggested giving her a bonus for all her hard work, Sarah said the regular salary was more than enough. When he asked if she needed any help with anything, Sarah always said everything was fine. The more Marcus thought about it, the more curious he became. Who was this woman who had become so important to his daughter's happiness? What was her story? Why did she seem to have no life outside of caring for Emma? Marcus told himself he was just being a responsible employer. He should know more about the person who spent so much time with his child. But deep down, he knew his interest in Sarah was becoming personal. He respected her dedication to Emma, but he also found himself drawn to her quiet strength and mysterious nature. One evening in late October, as Sarah gathered her things to leave as usual, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of saying his normal goodnight and going to his study to work, he decided to follow Sarah and see where she went after work. He waited a few minutes after Sarah left, then grabbed his car keys and went outside. He could see Sarah walking down the street in the distance. Marcus got in his car and slowly drove behind her, staying far enough back that she wouldn't notice him. As Marcus followed Sarah through the darkening streets, he had no idea that what he was about to discover would change not only how he saw his daughter's nanny, but how he saw love, sacrifice, and what it truly meant to care for someone else. Marcus drove slowly behind Sarah, keeping his car far enough back so she would not see him. His heart was beating fast. He felt like he was doing something wrong, but he could not stop himself. He needed to know where Sarah went every night and why she was so secretive about her life. Sarah walked quickly down the street. She did not look around or stop to talk to anyone. Marcus had expected her to go to the bus stop or call a taxi, but she just kept walking. The streetlights were starting to come on, and Marcus realized Sarah was walking into a part of town he rarely visited. After 20 minutes of walking, Sarah was in a completely different neighborhood. The houses here were smaller and older. Some had broken fences and yards full of weeds. This was not the kind of place Marcus usually came to. He felt uncomfortable driving his expensive car through these streets, but he was too curious to turn back now. Sarah finally stopped walking. She was standing in front of a small apartment building that looked like it needed repairs. The paint was peeling off the walls and some of the windows had cracks in them. Marcus parked his car across the street and watched carefully, but Sarah did not go into the building through the front door. Instead, she walked around to the back of the building. Marcus got out of his car quietly and followed her, hiding behind some trees so she would not see him. Behind the apartment building was a small porch with a ramp leading up to it. On the porch sat an elderly woman in a wheelchair. The woman looked very old and very sick. Her hair was thin and white, and she was covered with several blankets. Even though the evening was not very cold, Marcus watched in amazement as Sarah ran up to the elderly woman and gave her a big, warm hug. The old woman's face lit up with joy when she saw Sarah. It was clear that this was the best part of both their days. Sarah immediately started taking care of the elderly woman. She checked to make sure the blankets were tucked in properly around her legs. She looked at several bottles of medicine that were sitting on a small table next to the wheelchair. She pulled a small bag of groceries out of her purse that Marcus had not noticed her carrying. Marcus hid behind a parked car and watched for over an hour. Sarah was completely focused on caring for the elderly woman. She helped her drink some water and take her medicine. She unpacked the groceries and showed the woman what she had bought. Everything Sarah did was gentle and loving. The elderly woman could not speak very well. Marcus could hear her trying to talk, but her words were slow and unclear. Sarah was very patient with her. She listened carefully to everything the woman tried to say and responded as if she understood perfectly. Sarah took out some food from the grocery bag and began feeding the elderly woman very slowly and carefully. The woman had trouble chewing and swallowing, so Sarah had to give her very small bites and wait between each one. Marcus realized this must take a very long time every single day, while the elderly woman ate. Sarah talked to her in a soft, cheerful voice. She told her about Emma and the funny things Emma had done that day. She described the games they had played and the stories they had read. The elderly woman smiled and nodded, clearly enjoying every word. Marcus began to understand that this elderly woman must be Sarah's grandmother or maybe another relative. The love between them was obvious. This was not a job or a duty. This was family taking care of family. After the elderly woman finished eating, Sarah helped her take several different medicines. She was very careful to give the right pills at the right time. She wrote notes on a piece of paper, probably keeping track of when each medicine was given. Marcus realized that caring for someone this sick required a lot of knowledge and attention. Sarah then helped the elderly woman go to the bathroom, supporting her weight as she moved slowly from the wheelchair. Marcus looked away during this private moment, but he could hear Sarah speaking encouraging words and being very patient. When they came back to the porch, Sarah sat in a chair next to the wheelchair and just talked with the elderly woman. Sometimes they both laughed softly at something. Sometimes the elderly woman tried to tell Sarah a story, and Sarah listened as if it was the most interesting thing in the world. As it got darker, Marcus expected Sarah to say goodbye and go to her own home somewhere else. But instead, Sarah began helping the elderly woman get ready to go inside the apartment. She folded up the blankets, gathered the medicine bottles, and carefully pushed the wheelchair up the ramp and through the back door. Marcus moved closer to the building and looked through a window. The apartment was very small and simple. There was old furniture and not much decoration, but it was clean and organized. Sarah continued taking care of the elderly woman inside, helping her get ready for bed. Marcus waited outside for 2 more hours, expecting Sarah to come out and go to her real home. But the lights stayed on in the apartment, and Sarah never came out. Slowly, Marcus began to realize the truth. Sarah did not go home after work because she was already home. She lived in this tiny apartment with this sick elderly woman. Marcus felt shocked and amazed. All this time, he had been wondering where Sarah went every night. Now he knew. She went home to take care of someone who needed her even more than Emma did. After spending all day caring for his daughter, Sarah spent all evening and night caring for this elderly woman. Marcus thought about Sarah's behavior at work with new understanding. She never complained about being tired, but now he realized she probably never got enough sleep. She never bought expensive food or clothes, but now he understood. She was probably spending all her money on medicine and care for the elderly woman. Sarah never talked about her personal life, because her personal life was full of responsibility and worry. She could not go out with friends or take vacations because she had someone depending on her every single day. Marcus sat in his car outside the apartment building for a long time, thinking about what he had discovered. He felt guilty for following Sarah, but he also felt deep respect for her. Sarah was not just a good nanny. She was a good person who was quietly carrying a huge burden without ever asking for help or sympathy. Finally, Marcus drove home, but he could not stop thinking about what he had seen. Sarah's secret life was not what he had expected at all. It was not exciting or mysterious. It was difficult and full of sacrifice, and it made Marcus admire her more than ever. Marcus could not sleep that night. He kept thinking about what he had seen at the apartment building. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sarah gently feeding the elderly woman and helping her take her medicine. He thought about how tired Sarah must be every single day, but she never showed it when she was taking care of Emma. The next morning, Marcus watched Sarah arrive for work at exactly 7 o'clock as usual. She looked the same as always, neat, clean, and ready to start her day. But now Marcus saw everything differently. He noticed that Sarah's eyes looked a little tired. He saw that her clothes, while clean, were the same ones she had worn many times before. Marcus tried to act normal, but it was very difficult. He wanted to ask Sarah about the elderly woman, but he knew he could not do that without admitting he had followed her. He also felt guilty about spying on her private life. During breakfast, Marcus watched Sarah help Emma eat her pancakes. Sarah was patient and kind, just like she had been with the elderly woman the night before. She made sure Emma had everything. She kneaded and listened carefully when Emma told her about a dream she had. Marcus realized that Sarah was giving the same loving care to two different people every single day. After working all day with Emma, she went home to work all evening and night with the elderly woman. When did Sarah have time for herself? When did she rest? Marcus left for his office, but he could not concentrate on work. His business partners were talking about important deals and meetings, but all Marcus could think about was Sarah. He kept making mistakes and forgetting things. His secretary asked him 3 times if he was feeling sick. At lunchtime, Marcus made an excuse to leave the office early. He drove home and parked where he could see the backyard. Sarah and Emma were playing a game with a ball. Sarah was running around and laughing with Emma, acting like she had all the energy in the world. But Marcus could see now that Sarah was pushing herself to be cheerful and active even when she must be exhausted. Marcus began paying attention to small details he had never noticed before. Sarah always brought lunch from home in a simple brown bag. She never bought coffee or snacks from the expensive places near their house. When Marcus offered to order pizza or Chinese food for dinner, Sarah always said she was not hungry and did not need anything. Marcus also noticed that Sarah never used her phone during work hours. Other nannies he had hired were always texting friends or checking social media. Sarah kept her phone in her bag and only looked at it if Marcus needed to contact her about Emma. After a few days of watching and thinking, Marcus decided he needed to know more about Sarah's situation. He felt bad about investigating her private life, but he told himself he needed to understand the person who was taking care of his daughter. Marcus had connections with many different businesses in the city. He called a friend who ran a background check company and asked him to find out more about Sarah Williams. Marcus felt terrible about doing this, but his curiosity was too strong to ignore. 3 days later, his friend called back with information that made Marcus feel even worse about spying on Sarah, but it also made him respect her more than ever. Sarah Williams had been a college student studying early childhood education 3 years ago. She had been a very good student with excellent grades. Her teachers said she was smart and would make a wonderful teacher someday. Sarah had been planning to graduate and get a job working with children in a school or daycare center. But then, something terrible happened. Sarah's grandmother, Margaret Williams, had a massive stroke. Margaret was the only family Sarah had left. Sarah's parents had died in a car accident when Sarah was only 8 years old, and Margaret had raised her from that time. Margaret had worked 2 jobs for many years to pay for Sarah's education. She cleaned offices at night and worked in a grocery store during the day. She never married or had children of her own, so Sarah was the most important person in her life. Margaret saved every penny she could to make sure Sarah could go to college and have a better life. When Margaret had her stroke, everything changed. She could not walk or talk properly anymore. She needed someone to take care of her every day. The doctors said she would never get completely better. Sarah had to make a terrible choice. She could finish college and pursue her dreams, or she could take care of the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. Sarah chose to drop out of college just a few months before graduation. She gave up her future to take care of Margaret. The medical bills were enormous. Even with insurance, the cost of Margaret's medicines and treatments was more than Sarah could afford. Margaret needed special equipment, regular doctor visits, and expensive medications every day. Sarah had to find work immediately. She took the job as Emma's nanny because it paid well and the hours allowed her to be home with Margaret in the evenings and at night. But even with her full-time salary, Sarah was struggling to pay for everything Margaret needed. Marcus learned that Sarah was working extra jobs on weekends and evenings. She did online tutoring for children who needed help with schoolwork. She wrote articles for websites and magazines. She did any work she could find that allowed her to stay home with Margaret. Sarah had never missed a day of work with Emma, even when Margaret was having bad days and needed extra care. She had never complained or asked for help. She had never let her personal problems affect her job performance. Marcus also learned that Margaret's condition was getting worse. The doctor said she would probably need to go to a nursing home soon, because she needed more care than one person could provide. But good nursing homes were very expensive, and Sarah did not have enough money for that kind of care. Marcus sat in his office reading all this information and felt amazed by Sarah's strength and sacrifice. She was only 28 years old, but she was carrying responsibilities that would be difficult for anyone. She had given up her education, her career dreams, and her social life to care for the woman who had raised her. Marcus realized that Sarah was not just a good nanny. She was an extraordinary person who was quietly being a hero every single day. She was working as hard as she could to take care of two people who depended on her completely. That evening, Marcus watched Sarah leave work at 6 o'clock as usual. Now he knew exactly where she was going and what she would do for the rest of the night. He felt guilty for learning about her private life without her permission, but he also felt grateful to know the truth about the remarkable woman who was taking such good care of his daughter. Marcus spent the next few days trying to figure out how to talk to Sarah about what he had learned. He could not just pretend he did not know about Margaret and her difficult situation, but he also could not admit that he had followed her and investigated her background without her permission. The opportunity came when Emma got sick with a high fever. It was a Friday evening and Emma was lying on the couch feeling terrible. Sarah stayed late to help take care of her, bringing cool cloths for Emma's forehead and making sure she drank enough water. By 8 o'clock, Emma's fever had gone down a little and she was sleeping peacefully. Marcus and Sarah sat in the living room, both tired from worrying about Emma all day. The house was quiet except for the sound of Emma's soft breathing from the couch. Marcus looked at Sarah sitting in the chair across from him. She looked exhausted, but she was still ready to stay as long as Emma needed her. Marcus realized this was the perfect time to have the conversation he had been avoiding. Marcus started by telling Sarah how grateful he was for everything she had done for Emma. He said he had never seen Emma so happy and comfortable with anyone since Catherine died. Sarah smiled a little but looked confused about why Marcus was being so serious. Marcus continued talking, saying he had noticed that Sarah worked much harder than any other nanny he had ever hired. He said he could see that Sarah truly cared about Emma, not just as a job but as a person. Sarah looked uncomfortable and said she was just doing her job. Then Marcus said something that made Sarah's face change completely. He said he had noticed that Sarah seemed to have other responsibilities outside of work, and he wanted to know if there was anything he could do to help her. Sarah's eyes filled with tears immediately. She looked scared and worried. She asked Marcus what he meant, but her voice was shaking. Marcus realized he had to be honest with Sarah, even if it meant admitting what he had done. He told Sarah that he had been curious about her life outside of work because she was so important to Emma. He admitted that he had followed her one evening and seen her caring for an elderly woman. Sarah started crying and put her hands over her face. She said she was sorry and that she should have told Marcus about Margaret from the beginning. She said she understood if Marcus wanted to fire her for not being completely honest about her situation. Marcus quickly told Sarah that he did not want to fire her. He said he was amazed by her dedication to both Emma and Margaret. He asked Sarah to tell him everything about her grandmother's condition and their financial situation. Sarah was quiet for a long time, wiping tears from her eyes. Finally, she began to tell Marcus the whole story. She explained how Margaret had raised her after her parents died and how Margaret had worked so hard to put her through college. Sarah told Marcus about the day Margaret had her stroke and how her whole life changed in an instant. She described dropping out of college and learning how to take care of someone who was very sick. She talked about the medical bills and the constant worry about money. Sarah explained that Margaret needed help with everything now. She could not walk without help, and she had trouble speaking clearly. She needed medicine 4 times a day and had to go to the doctor twice a week. Margaret also needed help eating, bathing, and getting dressed. Sarah told Marcus that she had been saving every penny from her salary to pay for Margaret's care. She lived on very little food and never bought anything for herself unless it was absolutely necessary. She worked extra jobs on weekends and evenings, but it was still not enough to cover all the expenses. The worst part, Sarah said, was that Margaret's condition was getting worse. The doctors had told Sarah that Margaret would probably need to go to a nursing home soon because she needed more care than Sarah could provide alone. But the good nursing homes cost more money than Sarah could ever afford. Sarah said she had been thinking about looking for a different job that paid more money and had longer hours. She knew this would mean leaving Emma, which broke her heart. But she did not see any other way to get enough money for Margaret's care. As Sarah talked, Marcus felt his respect for her growing even more. She was carrying an enormous burden, but she had never complained or asked for sympathy. She had been trying to solve her problems by herself, even when it meant making painful sacrifices. Marcus asked Sarah how much money she needed for Margaret's care. Sarah looked embarrassed and said she did not want to burden Marcus with her problems. But Marcus insisted, saying he wanted to help if he could. Sarah finally admitted that Margaret's monthly expenses were almost as much as Sarah's entire salary. Between the medicines, doctor visits, special equipment, and other needs, Sarah was spending almost every penny she earned. She had no savings and was always worried about unexpected medical bills. Marcus listened to every word Sarah said. He realized that all of Sarah's mysterious behavior now made perfect sense. She was not secretive because she was hiding something bad. She was private because she was dealing with something very difficult and did not want to burden other people with her problems. Marcus also realized that his feelings for Sarah had grown. Beyond just being grateful for her work with Emma, he admired her strength, her kindness, and her willingness to sacrifice for someone she loved. He cared about her as a person, not just as an employee. Marcus told Sarah that he wanted to help her and Margaret. He said he had money that he was not using, and he would be happy to pay for Margaret's medical expenses and nursing care. Sarah looked shocked and said she could not accept such a generous offer, but Marcus insisted. He said Sarah had given Emma something precious that money could not buy. She had given Emma love, stability, and happiness during the most difficult time in both their lives. Marcus said helping Sarah and Margaret would be a way of saying thank you for everything Sarah had done for his family. Sarah cried harder and said she did not know what to say. She had been struggling alone for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone offer to help her. Marcus realized that this conversation was changing everything between him and Sarah. They were no longer just employer and employee. They were two people who cared about each other and wanted to help each other through difficult times. As they sat in the quiet living room with Emma sleeping peacefully nearby, Marcus felt like his whole world was shifting. He had started following Sarah because he was curious about her mysterious behavior. Now he was discovering that Sarah was exactly the kind of person he had always hoped to find, someone who was strong, caring, and completely genuine. Marcus did not know what would happen next, but he knew that he wanted Sarah and Margaret to be part of his and Emma's life in a much bigger way than just a work relationship. That night after his conversation with Sarah, Marcus could not sleep at all. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything Sarah had told him. He kept picturing her taking care of Margaret every single night after working. All day with Emma, he thought about how tired she must be, but she never complained or showed it. Marcus got up and walked to his window. He looked out at the quiet street and thought about his own life. He had so much money that he did not even know exactly how much he had. His business was very successful, and he owned several companies that made money every month without him. Having to do much work, after Catherine died, Marcus had stopped caring about making more money. What was the point? He had enough money to take care of Emma for her entire life. He had enough money to buy anything he wanted. But the money did not make him happy, and it did not bring Catherine back. Now Marcus realized that his money could do something much more important than just sitting in the bank. It could solve Sarah's problems and change her life completely. It could help Margaret get better medical care. It could give Sarah the chance to finish her education and pursue her dreams. Marcus also thought about his feelings for Sarah. When he first hired her, he had just wanted someone who would take good care of Emma, but over the past 8 months, Sarah had become much more than an employee. She had brought warmth and joy back into their house. Emma loved Sarah more than any of the other nannies they had tried. But Marcus realized that he cared about Sarah too, not just as Emma's caregiver, but as a person. He admired her strength, her kindness, and her dedication to the people she loved. He was starting to fall in love with her. The next morning was Saturday, so Sarah did not come to work. Marcus spent the day playing with Emma, but he kept thinking about Sarah and Margaret. Emma asked several times when Sarah would come back, which made Marcus realize how important Sarah had become to both of them. Marcus spent the whole weekend thinking about what he wanted to do. He made lists of all the ways he could help Sarah and Margaret. He thought about how much money it would cost and realized it was not very much compared to what he had. The amount of money that was causing Sarah so much stress was less than what Marcus spent on his car on Sunday evening. Marcus called Sarah and asked if she could stay after work on Monday for another important conversation. Sarah sounded worried and asked if she had done something wrong. Marcus quickly told her she had done nothing wrong, and that he just wanted to discuss how he could help her situation. Monday seemed to last forever. Marcus tried to work, but he kept thinking about what he was going to say to Sarah. He had made several big decisions over the weekend, and he hoped Sarah would accept his help. That evening, after Emma had eaten dinner and was playing quietly in her room, Marcus and Sarah sat down in the living room. Sarah looked nervous and kept asking if everything was okay with Emma or her job performance. Marcus told Sarah that he had spent the entire weekend thinking about their conversation on Friday night. He said he had made some important decisions that he hoped would help both her and Margaret. First, Marcus said he wanted to pay for all of Margaret's medical expenses from now on. This included her medicines, doctor visits, hospital bills, special equipment, and anything else she needed for her health. Sarah immediately started to say she could not accept such a generous offer, but Marcus asked her to let him finish explaining everything. Second, Marcus said he wanted to hire professional nurses to help take care of Margaret during the day. These nurses would be trained to help people who had strokes, and they would know exactly how to give Margaret the best possible care. This would mean Sarah would not have to do everything by herself anymore. The nurses could help Margaret with bathing, eating, taking her medicine, and doing exercises to help her get stronger. They could also stay with Margaret if she needed to go to the doctor or if there was any kind of emergency. This would give Sarah time to rest and have some free time for herself. Third, Marcus said he wanted to pay for Sarah to go back to college and finish her degree in early childhood education. He knew she had been very close to graduating when she had to drop out to take care of Margaret. Marcus thought Sarah should have the chance to complete her education and become the teacher she had always wanted to be. Marcus explained that Sarah could take classes online or in the evening so she could still take care of Emma during the day. Once she graduated, she could decide if she wanted to get a teaching job or continue working as a nanny. The choice would be hers. Sarah was crying as Marcus explained all of this. She kept shaking her head and saying she could not believe someone would be so kind to her. She said she had been struggling alone for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone offer to help, but then Marcus said something that surprised both of them. He told Sarah that his offer to help was not just because he was grateful for her work with Emma over the past 8 months. Sarah had become one of the most important people in his life. Marcus admitted that he had feelings for Sarah that went beyond just being her employer. He said she had brought happiness and love back into his house in a way he had not felt since Catherine died. He cared about her not just as Emma's nanny, but as a woman he was falling in love with. Marcus told Sarah that he wanted to help her and Margaret because he wanted them to be part of his family. He said he hoped that someday, if Sarah felt the Same way about him, they could build a real relationship together and create a loving home for Emma. Margaret and themselves. Sarah looked completely shocked by Marcus's confession. She said she had developed feelings for Marcus too, but she had never allowed herself to think about the possibility of anything more than a work relationship. She had been so focused on surviving each day and taking care of Margaret that she had not thought about her own happiness or a romantic future. Sarah admitted that she cared about Marcus and Emma very much. She said working in their house had been the happiest part of her day, even during the most difficult times with Margaret. But she was also scared and worried. Sarah said she had been taking care of other people for so long that she did not know how to let someone take care of her. She was also worried about what would happen to Margaret if a romantic relationship between her and Marcus did not work out. Marcus understood Sarah's fears completely. He told her that his offer to help Margaret was not dependent on whether Sarah wanted to have a romantic relationship with him. He said Margaret would always be welcome in his home, and he would always make sure she received the best possible medical care. No matter what happened between him and Sarah personally, Marcus also said he did not expect Sarah to make any quick decisions about their relationship. He said they could take things very slowly and see how they felt as they spent more time together. The most important thing right now was making sure Margaret got the care she needed and that Sarah had the support she deserved. Sarah asked Marcus why he was willing to do so much for people he had only known for 8 months. Marcus thought about this question for a long time before answering. Marcus said that following Sarah that evening had been the best decision he had ever made, even though it felt wrong at the time. It had shown him what kind of person Sarah really was, someone who sacrificed her own dreams to take care of the person who had raised her. It had shown him that sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones who quietly do extraordinary things without expecting any recognition. Marcus also said that his money had felt meaningless since Catherine died. He had more than he could ever spend, but it did not make him happy. Now he could use his money to help people he cared about, and that gave his wealth real purpose and meaning. Sarah cried for a long time as she thought about everything Marcus had offered. Finally, she agreed to accept his help with Margaret's medical care and the professional nurses. She said she would think about going back to college and about the possibility of a personal relationship with Marcus. Sarah asked if she could bring Margaret to meet Marcus and Emma before making any big decisions about the future. She said Margaret was the most important person in her life, and she needed to know that Margaret would be comfortable and happy with any changes. Marcus was delighted by this suggestion. He said he would love to meet the woman who had raised such an amazing person. He also thought Emma would enjoy having a grandmother figure in her life, since both of her real grandparents lived far away. They sat together in the quiet living room. Both Marcus and Sarah felt like their whole world was changing. What had started as a conversation about Sarah's work problems had become something much deeper and more personal. Marcus realized that his simple decision to follow Sarah home had led to the most important conversation of his life. He had discovered not only Sarah's secret struggles, but also his own capacity to love again and his desire to build a new family. Sarah realized that her years of struggling alone were finally coming to an end. For the first time since Margaret's stroke, she could imagine a future where she was not constantly worried about money and medical bills. She could imagine finishing her education, pursuing her dreams, and maybe even finding love and happiness. 1 year after Marcus and Sarah's wedding, their lives had changed in ways that still amazed them every day. Marcus often stood at his office window, just like he used to do, but now when he looked out at the backyard, he saw something completely different than before. Emma was playing in the garden, but she was not alone with just Sarah anymore. Margaret was sitting in her wheelchair under the big oak tree, laughing as Emma showed her how to plant flowers in small pots. Sarah was kneeling beside them, helping Emma dig holes in the dirt and explaining how plants grow. The professional nurses that Marcus had hired had made an enormous difference in Margaret's care. She was getting her medicine on time every day, eating better food, and receiving physical therapy that helped her move more easily. Most importantly, Margaret was no longer alone and worried about being a burden on Sarah. Margaret had her own room in Marcus's house now, specially designed to meet all her needs. It had a hospital bed, special bathroom equipment, and large windows that let in lots of sunlight. Margaret loved to sit by the windows and watch the birds in the backyard. Sarah had finished her college degree 6 months ago, graduating with honors despite having to take care of Emma and Margaret at the same time. Marcus had been so proud, watching Sarah walk across the stage to receive her diploma. He knew how hard she had worked and how much that degree meant to her. Now, Sarah was working as a teacher at a local elementary school while still taking care of Emma after school and on weekends. She loved her new job and was already making a difference in the lives of many children. Her own experiences with Emma had taught her how to connect with children who were sad or struggling. Emma was thriving in ways that amazed everyone who knew her. She now had not just a stepmother who loved her, but also a great-grandmother who told her stories and taught her things that only older people know. Emma had learned to be patient and gentle with Margaret, and she was becoming a caring and responsible little girl. Emma had also started calling Sarah Mama Sarah and Margaret Grandma Maggie. She understood that her first mother, Catherine, would always be special and important, but she was happy to have more people to love and who loved her back. Marcus's business was doing better than ever, partly because he was happier and more focused at work. He no longer felt guilty about leaving Emma at home because he knew she was surrounded by people who truly cared about her. He also felt proud every day knowing that his success was helping to take care of 4 people he loved instead of just himself. The biggest surprise had come 3 months ago. When Sarah told Marcus she was pregnant, they were both excited and a little nervous about having a new baby. Emma was thrilled about becoming a big sister, and Margaret was overjoyed about the possibility of living long enough to meet her great-grandchild. Sarah's pregnancy had been going well, and the doctor said the baby would be born in the spring. Marcus and Sarah had decided not to find out if the baby was a boy or girl. They said they just wanted a healthy baby who would grow up surrounded by love. As Marcus watched his family in the backyard, he thought about all the changes that had happened since that evening when he decided to follow Sarah home from work. That one decision had led to discoveries that changed everything about his life. Marcus had learned that sometimes the most important things in life are hidden from view. Sarah's quiet strength and sacrificial love had been invisible to him until he took the time to really look. Her dedication to Margaret had shown him what real love looked like. Marcus had also learned that money was only valuable when it was used to help people and solve problems. All his business success had felt meaningless after Catherine died, but now his wealth was making possible a life full of love and happiness for people he cared about. Most importantly, Marcus had learned that families can be created in unexpected ways. He and Sarah had not met through friends or dating. They had been brought together by his need for a nanny and her need for a job. But their relationship had grown into something beautiful, because they had both been willing to put other people's needs before their own. Sarah had learned important lessons too. She had discovered that accepting help was not a sign of weakness, but a way of allowing other people to show their love. For years, she had tried to carry all her burdens alone, but now she understood that sharing difficulties with people who cared about her made everyone stronger. Sarah had also learned that it was possible to take care of the people she loved without sacrificing her own dreams and happiness. With Marcus's support and the professional nurses helping with Margaret, Sarah had been able to finish her education and pursue her career while still being a loving caregiver. Margaret had experienced the biggest change of all. For 3 years after her stroke, she had felt like a burden on Sarah. She had been sad and worried about preventing Sarah from having a normal life. But now Margaret felt useful and loved again. Margaret helped Emma with homework every day, teaching her things that schools did not cover. She told Emma stories about the old days and helped her understand family history. Margaret also gave Sarah and Marcus advice about marriage and parenting, sharing wisdom that came from many years of life experience. The doctors had been amazed by the improvement in Margaret's health. Since she moved to Marcus's house, they said, That having better medical care was important, but having a loving family environment was even more crucial for her recovery. Emma had learned the most important lesson of all, though she was still too young to fully understand it. She had learned that love comes in many different forms and that families can grow in unexpected ways. She had also learned that taking care of people who need help is one of the most important things people can do for each other on weekends. The whole family would often sit together on the back porch, talking about their week and making plans for the future. Marcus and Sarah would hold hands while Emma played with toys at their feet, and Margaret told stories about when she was young. These were the moments that Marcus treasured most. They reminded him that the best things in life could not be bought with money or achieved through business success. The best things came from opening your heart to people who needed love and being willing to give more than you received. Marcus often thought about what might have happened if he had never followed Sarah home that evening. He might never have discovered her secret struggles or realized how much he cared about her. Sarah might have been forced to quit her job to find higher-paying work, and Emma would have lost the best nanny she ever had. Margaret might have ended up in a nursing home where she did not want to be, and Sarah might have spent her whole life working multiple jobs just to pay medical bills. None of them would have experienced the joy and love that they shared now, but Marcus had made that decision to follow Sarah, and it had led to discoveries that changed all their lives for the better. Sometimes the most important moments in life come from following your curiosity and caring enough about other people to really see them. As the sun set over their backyard and the family prepared to go inside for dinner, Marcus felt grateful for every decision that had led them to this moment. He had started as a lonely widower trying to find good care for his daughter, but he had ended up with a complete family full of love, laughter, and hope for the future. The millionaire widower's simple act of following his nanny had uncovered not just her secret struggles, but also the possibility of love and happiness that he thought he had lost forever. And every day he was reminded that the best discoveries in life come not from searching for them, but from being open to the unexpected. Gifts that appear when you least expect them.